Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jane Portman, co-founder of userlist.io. Thank you for joining us today, and we're going to talk about behavior-driven email. So when it comes to onboarding and retention, it's obvious that behavior-based email is much better than just sending a ton of irrelevant emails to a user. But what behavior means exactly for your particular SaaS product? What events and properties can you track? What kind of triggers can you use? This talk should give you actionable insight on that and some more, so that hopefully today you can start sending better messages and smarter messages to your users or experiment with your tracking. So before we get started, I'd love to tell you a bit more about UserList. It's a tool that we run, built specifically for SaaS companies, and it allows us to collect information about your users, anything that you decide to share and decide to send to our API. We track that. We display that information about every user in our interface and allow you to set up automations such as campaigns and broadcasts and send these messages to your users. However, this talk today will be totally product agnostic. As much as we'd love you to use our tool, you can absolutely use any marketing tool of your choice, such as Intercom, Customer.io, Vero, Autopilot, ConvertKit, Drip, or anything else that you find useful. In the first part of our talk today, we're going to talk about what to track. And one thing you should keep in mind, don't just track for the purpose of tracking. You should always have goals because it will help you to figure out what to track. One goal is to see what is going on with an individual user. So you might have a practice of going to your recent user profiles and taking a look where exactly the users are in their journey, figuring out like what they did. So that's one use case. And another use case, much closer to our today's topic, is sending behavior-based communication using this data. It's important to understand the difference between properties and events because these are very similar forms of organizing the same behavior data. Properties, or user data, only represent the current state of the user. Properties typically live in the user profile, so you can't really see in the past. However, this is the most reliable way of displaying important user information, such as user name, email address, some critical information about the product usage, such as how many projects they have currently, how many photos they currently manage, etc., etc. Classic property examples are first name, last name, email address, sign-up date, number of projects, number of photos, anything like that. Unlike properties, events are closely related to a date. They have a timestamp, a temporal aspect, and they live in the timeline. So it's a much larger massive of data where you can see what happened in the past. And events can also have additional properties associated with them. For example, if there is an event of an album uploaded, you can also see maybe the type of this album or a number of photos or something like that. And events can trigger a campaign when they happen, and properties can trigger campaigns when they change value. So that's the major difference. Event examples could be system events such as account created, or events that are happening relevant to your app activities such as photo uploaded, project created, etc., etc. What exactly can you track? I'm going to talk about 4 groups of events and properties. And group number 1 is general user information, which is very, very similar for most of the SaaS companies. These are things like first name, last name, sign-up date, company name, account role, owner, manager, guest, etc. These are great for filtering out certain user types and for sending them relevant messages. Group number 2 is payment information, so anything relevant to the user payment status. Most likely, that's going to come from your payment provider of choice, so it's really helpful to name them the same way that they appear in Stripe, for example, if you're using Stripe. So this could be something like trial expiration date, their plan, their monthly spend, lifetime value, subscription status such as trial, active, or canceled, next billing date, billing interval, monthly or annually, and things like that. And events could be things like trial expired, payment failed, payment succeeded, plan updated, subscription status updated. The third group of events and properties is relevant to the settings. Settings are useful because they very often represent a certain stage in the user activation journey. For example, in many apps, users firsthand need to customize some of their settings before they can start doing something with your app. So you can introduce some properties relevant to your settings, such as the number of templates they created or the number of custom domains, so that you can see where the user is and whether or not you can start promoting them further in their journey. And the last group is related to user activity. These are things specific to your app. For example, events could be things like project created, notifications sent, comment received, and other kinds of events that demonstrate the user activity in the project. As for properties, these could be things like the number of active projects, the number of photos currently uploaded. And you can also go a little bit further and also store values that have been accumulated over the lifetime of the user. This way, you can figure out the users that have received maximum value from your product over their lifetime. For example, they currently might have just 5 photos uploaded, but they might have a history of having uploaded like thousands of photos. So this makes the user special, and you can send a special campaign to them. Part number 2 is when to send. So we're going to talk about different trigger types and different approaches to creating them. Firsthand, there are 4 basic types of events, count milestones, which are, again, very similar for every business. So these are creating an account or signing up for a free trial, a trial ending, trial expiration date, converting or signing up for a paid plan, and canceling an account. So you can send a ton of things if you just track these 4 things. However, you can go further and design some custom triggers specific to your business. And let's talk over some of the approaches. Approach number 1 is simple activation. If you do properties, that would mean property value changing from 0 to 1, demonstrating that the user did something for the first time. If you're using events, that would be an event happening for the first time ever. You can use this kind of trigger to send encouragement or targeted bits of education. The next type would be having a certain state unlocked or achieved. So the user starts matching a certain set of conditions, which you choose to classify as activated or advanced or professional, etc., etc. If you use properties, it could be a combination of property conditions, such as property A has a value of minimum X, and property B has a value of Y. And if you're using events, it could be something like event A happened at least X times ever, and event B happened at least Y times ever. You can use these to send all kinds of things, such as encouragement notes, different education sequences. For example, when the user shifts from one level to another, you can start sending them different kinds of educational emails. Rewards, promotions, you can ask people for referral, and so on and so forth. Another approach is tracking activity over the last period of time, which can indicate certain splashes of activity so that the user can be rewarded. For example, if the user has uploaded thousands of photos over the last month, that means that they suddenly became active and they deserve some reward or a special email from you. In this case, a trigger would be event-based, such as event A has happened at least X times over the last period. Similar to this, you can track inactivity, which is the user not doing something. For example, event A has happened exactly 0 times in the last period. And you can send email that would incentivize these users to continue working with the product or showing up. A few other things to consider. Segments are pretty important and super useful in setting up your automations. Segments are user groups that update dynamically based on conditions that you set up. And they're great because you can separate accurately setting up the conditions from actually using these conditions in automations. So you go to the special section in the app called segments, you name a segment, you define who these people are, like what kinds of triggers or conditions you use there. And then when you start implementing a campaign, your trigger would be as simple as joining a segment or leaving a segment. So you can reuse the same conditions over and over in different campaigns. And also, another effect of that is having a list of segments and understanding how large each segment is, so you can have, at a glance, a good understanding of your user base structure. And don't neglect other conditions. Triggers don't necessarily have to be just entry point campaign triggers. You can set up individual conditions for each message in the workflow, and you can also set up conditions for an exit so that the campaign stops sending. When it comes to campaign structure, we've talked to a lot of marketers and we've talked to a lot of founders, and we learned an interesting thing, that the hype is all about complicated visual workflow builders. However, most of the users just end up creating linear sequences. So our current top recommendation is to stick to linear campaigns. However, do filter each message based on whether it's applicable to the user or not. This way you can have an understandable, clear linear sequence promoting your features one by one. However, you won't be sending anything irrelevant to people, which is probably the main goal. And a few more recommendations before you start, before you get down to work. Quality, of course, trumps quantity, so please don't be upset if you don't send too much. You really don't have to send too much. And there is typically no need to be creative. Just focus on down straight, delivering value, delivering useful education to your users on time, and that's already going to be a great step forward. And of course, plan before you implement. It's great to plan your tracking and your sending together so that you can figure out what to send and what data you need to track in order to send it. So just to recap, in today's lesson, we learned about tracking. We learned why we need to track, what we can track in your business. We understand the difference between properties and events, and we understand different types of triggers and conditions that you can be using in your automation campaigns. If you'd like to learn more, we have a ton of resources. Firsthand, you can get our email planning worksheets if you head over to userlist.io/worksheets. And you can, of course, explore our blog and knowledge base for more information. And we also have full text campaign templates in case you need any inspiration. So thanks again. This was Jane Portman talking about behavior-driven email. And thank you again for joining us today at the summit.